The
I
cold
found
grip
it.
of a hand closed around my wrist at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in
They're
February.
here.
I remember the exact time because I had been staring at my phone, counting down the minutes until my shift at the diner started, wondering if I could squeeze in 2 hours of sleep before slinging hash browns to hungover NYU students. That was the exact moment my entire life detonated. You have 5 seconds to explain why you broke into my warehouse. A voice said in accented English, deep, controlled, the kind of voice that suggested its owner had never needed to raise it to be obeyed. I should have been terrified. Any reasonable person would have been terrified, surrounded by 6 armed men in a freezing Brooklyn warehouse at nearly 4 in the morning. Instead, I laughed. It was not a smart move. I knew that even as the sound escaped my throat. Hysterical, inappropriate, and probably signing my death warrant. But I had been running on 4 hours of sleep across 3 days. I owed more money than I would make in a decade, and the man I had come to collect a debt from had apparently been protected by the Korean Mafia. Because of course he was. Of course, the one time I took a freelance job to make extra cash, I walked straight into a mob operation. My life had that kind of luck. Something funny? The voice asked. The grip on my wrist tightened. Yeah, I said, still half laughing and half choking. The universe has a really twisted sense of humor. I came here to collect $20,000 from a guy named Tommy Huang. Turns out Tommy Huang is connected to. I gestured vaguely at the men surrounding me. Whatever this is. Silence. Then the grip released, and someone flicked on the overhead lights. I blinked against the sudden brightness, my eyes watering as they adjusted. When they finally focused, I found myself staring at the most beautiful man I had ever seen in my life. He was tall, Korean obviously, with sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could cut glass. His black hair was swept back from his face, and he wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe combined. But it was his eyes that stopped me cold. Dark brown, almost black, and completely, utterly empty. I had seen a lot of dangerous men in my 26 years. Growing up in Bed-Stuy, working as a debt collector for people who operated outside the law. Surviving in a world that did not care whether girls like me lived or died. But I had never seen eyes like his. Eyes that looked at me like I was already a ghost, and he was simply deciding where to scatter the ashes. Who sent you? He asked. Ray Donovan. He runs a collection agency out of the Bronx. Operates in the gray areas, if you know what I mean. I saw no point in lying. Dead women cannot benefit from dishonesty. And you work for him. Freelance. I needed extra money for... I hesitated. This was the part where I could spin a sympathetic story, try to manipulate my way out of this situation. But something about those empty eyes told me that manipulation would not work on this man. My brother, I said flatly. He needs surgery. Rare bone condition. Insurance will not cover it because they claim it is a pre-existing condition. So I work 3 jobs and pick up side gigs collecting debts for people who cannot go through legal channels. The man studied me for a long moment. Then he said something in Korean to one of his men, who immediately left the warehouse. Your name? Deja Monroe. Miss Monroe. He stepped closer, and I forced myself not to flinch. You have stumbled into something much larger than a $20,000 debt. Tommy Huang is not just connected to my organization. He is a witness in a federal investigation. And now you have been seen entering a warehouse that is under surveillance. My blood went cold. Under surveillance by who? FBI, Homeland Security, perhaps others. His expression did not change, which means you have become a liability. I did not see anything. I do not know anything. I just wanted to collect a debt and go home. Unfortunately, that is no longer relevant. The people watching this warehouse now have footage of you entering. They will want to know who you are, what you know, and who you work for. So what happens now? You make me disappear. For the first time, something flickered in those empty eyes. Surprise, maybe, or amusement. If I wanted you gone, Miss Monroe, you would already be gone. He turned away, walking toward a door at the far end of the warehouse. What happens now is that you come with me. Until I can determine exactly how much damage you have done to my operation, you are my guest. Guest is a polite word for prisoner. He paused at the door, looking back over his shoulder. Yes, he agreed. It is. And that was how I met Seo-jin, underboss of the Lee crime family, the man who would destroy my life and then rebuild it from the ashes. The first week of my captivity was spent in a room that was nicer than any apartment I had ever lived in. It sounds ridiculous, I know. Kidnapped by the Korean Mafia and complaining that my prison cell has better amenities than my studio in the Bronx. But that is the absurdity of my life. The room was on the third floor of a brownstone in Park Slope. Actual Park Slope, not the sketchy edges where gentrification had not quite reached. The walls were exposed brick, the furniture was expensive but tasteful, and there was a private bathroom with a rainfall showerhead that made me want to cry every time I used it. My brother Marcus would have laughed at me. Only you, Deja, he would say. Only you could get kidnapped and end up with a housing upgrade. Except Marcus did not know I was kidnapped. Marcus did not know anything, because Seo-jin had confiscated my phone the night he took me, and any attempt to contact the outside world resulted in a polite but firm reminder that my continued well-being depended on my cooperation. So I cooperated. What choice did I have? The first 3 days, I saw no one except the silent women who brought my meals. They were Korean, middle-aged, and absolutely refused to respond to any of my attempts at conversation. I asked them questions. I tried different languages. I even attempted to bribe them with promises of future payment. Nothing. By the 4th day, I was going stir-crazy. I had paced every inch of that room. I had read every book on the small shelf in the corner. I had done more push-ups and sit-ups than I had done in my entire life combined. And I had thought, a lot, about Marcus, who was probably worried sick about me by now. About the diner, where my absence was undoubtedly creating problems. About Ray Donovan, who had sent me into this mess and probably did not even know or care what had happened to me. And about Seo-jin. I could not stop thinking about him. Those empty eyes, that controlled voice, the way he had looked at me like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be considered. Who was he really? What had I stumbled into? On the 5th day, I got my answer. The door to my room opened without warning, and Seo-jin walked in carrying a manila folder. He was dressed more casually than the night we met. Dark jeans, a gray sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His hair was slightly disheveled, like he had been running his hands through it. He looked almost human. Almost. Miss Monroe. He sat in the chair across from my bed without asking permission. We need to talk. Finally, I was starting to think you had forgotten about me. I have been occupied. He opened the folder, spreading several photographs across the bedspread between us. Do you recognize any of these men? I leaned forward, studying the images. Most of them meant nothing to me. Generic faces, the kind you might see on any street corner in any city. But one photograph made my breath catch. A heavy-set white man with a shaved head and a scar that ran from his right eye to his jaw. Cold blue eyes. A smile that suggested he enjoyed causing pain. That one, I said quietly. Victor Petrov. They call him the Butcher. Seo-jin's expression did not change, but I could feel the sudden tension in the room. How do you know him? He came to our neighborhood about 2 years ago, started recruiting young boys, 12, 13 years old, promised them money, respect, protection, the usual lies. I swallowed hard against the memory. My brother was almost one of them. Almost. I got him out, tracked him down to one of Petrov's stash houses, walked in, and pulled him out by his ear. Marcus was 14. I laughed bitterly. Petrov's men tried to stop me. I told them I would come back with hell itself if they ever looked at my brother again. That was either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. I met his eyes. Why are you asking about Petrov? Seo-jin was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into the folder and pulled out one more photograph. A young woman, Korean, maybe 19 or 20, beautiful with long dark hair and a smile that suggested she found joy in small things. She was sitting in a garden somewhere, laughing at something off camera. My sister, Seo-jin said. His voice was exactly the same as always. Controlled, empty, but his hands trembled slightly as he held the photograph. Her name was Hannah. Victor Petrov took her from us, Seo-jin continued. 18 months ago, she was investigating his trafficking operation for a nonprofit she worked with. She got too close, asked too many questions. They found her in the East River. I stared at the photograph, at the laughing girl who would never laugh again. I am sorry, I said, and I meant it. Sorry does not bring her back. Seo-jin gathered the photographs, sliding them back into the folder. But justice might, or at least something that resembles it. Is that why you are in this business? Trying to get to Petrov? He looked at me with those empty eyes, and for the first time I saw something behind the void. Pain, rage, a grief so vast it had hollowed him out from the inside. My family has been involved in certain activities for 3 generations, he said carefully. I did not choose this life. I was born into it. But Hannah chose differently. She was the good one, the pure one. She wanted to save people, not exploit them. And Petrov took her from you. Petrov is protected. He has connections in law enforcement and politics. Every time we get close to him, evidence disappears. Witnesses vanish. Cases fall apart. Seo-jin's jaw tightened. But Tommy Huang was one of his lieutenants. The FBI has been building a case against him for months. And when Tommy's testimony brings down Petrov's network, you will be waiting. Yes, I understood now. This was not just about business or territory or power. This was about vengeance. Cold, calculated, patient vengeance. What does any of this have to do with me? Seo-jin leaned back in his chair, studying me with new interest. You survived an encounter with Petrov's organization. You protected your brother from them. And you walked into my warehouse with no backup, no weapon, and no fear. I had plenty of fear. I just do not show it. Even better. He stood up, tucking the folder under his arm. Miss Monroe, I have a proposition for you. I am already your prisoner. What more do you want? Your skills. Your knowledge of Petrov's operation, your ability to move through neighborhoods where my men would be noticed immediately. He paused at the door. Help me destroy Victor Petrov. Help me get justice for my sister. And in return, I will pay for your brother's surgery. Every cent. I stared at him. Are you serious? I am always serious. And if I refuse, then you remain my guest until the federal investigation concludes, which could be months, perhaps years. It was not really a choice. He had to know that, but there was something in his expression that suggested he wanted me to choose anyway, that he wanted me to be a willing participant rather than a coerced one. I thought about Marcus, about the surgery that could save his life, that could free him from the constant pain that had plagued him since childhood. I thought about Petrov, about the boys he recruited and destroyed, about the girls who disappeared into his trafficking pipeline. And I thought about Hannah, the laughing girl in the photograph who had wanted to save people. Fine, I said, but I have conditions. Name them. 1. I need to contact my brother. Just a phone call to let him know I am alive. Acceptable. Supervised, of course. 2. I work with you, not for you. I am not joining your organization. I am not swearing loyalty, and I am not becoming a criminal. Also acceptable. 3. I stood up, crossing my arms over my chest. If this goes sideways, if you betray me or use me as bait or decide I am more useful gone than alive, I will burn your entire operation to the ground before I go." For the first time since I had met him, Seo-jin smiled. It was a small smile, barely there at all. But it transformed his face, made him look younger, almost boyish. "Miss Monroe," he said, "I think we are going to get along just fine." The next 2 months were the strangest of my life. I became a ghost. Officially, Deja Monroe had taken an extended leave of absence to care for a sick relative in another state. My landlord thought I had moved out. The diner had replaced me. Even Ray Donovan had stopped looking for me, probably assuming I had either skipped town or met an unfortunate end. Only Marcus knew the truth, or at least a version of it. "You are telling me," he said during one of our weekly supervised phone calls, "that you got a job working security for some rich guy in Manhattan. And this job pays so well that you can afford to take time off and cover my medical expenses." "Yes, Deja." "What?" "I am not stupid." I sighed. Of course he was not stupid. Marcus had always been the smart one. Even as a kid, even when he was making terrible decisions like almost joining Petrov's crew, he had been brilliant. The kind of brilliant that should have gotten him scholarships and opportunities instead of chronic illness and poverty. "I know you are not stupid," I said. "But this is complicated, Marcus. Really complicated. And I need you to trust me." A long pause. "Then are you safe?" Was I safe? I was living in a brownstone owned by a Korean mob boss, spending my days learning the intricate details of Victor Petrov's criminal empire, and my nights were complicated. "Yes," I told my brother, "I am safe." It was not entirely a lie. Seo-jin had kept his word about treating me as a partner rather than a prisoner. I had my own room, my own schedule, my own autonomy within certain limits. I ate meals with his crew, learned their names and their stories, and slowly started to understand the world I had stumbled into. The Lee family operated differently from other organized crime groups I had encountered. There were rules, codes of conduct, lines that were not crossed. No trafficking, no drugs, no exploitation of the vulnerable. Their money came from gambling, protection, and what Seo-jin delicately called asset recovery, basically high-end debt collection for people who could not go through legal channels. The kind of work I had been doing for Ray Donovan, except more organized and with better pay. How is this any different from what Petrov does? I asked Seo-jin one evening. We were sitting in his study, reviewing intelligence on Petrov's shipping routes. "You still operate outside the law." He considered the question seriously, which I had learned was his way. Seo-jin never dismissed my challenges or got defensive about his choices. "The difference," he said eventually, "is consent and consequence. The people we deal with have chosen to enter this world. They gamble knowing the risks. They borrow money knowing the terms. They request our protection knowing what that means." And Petrov takes people who have not chosen anything. Young girls from Eastern Europe who think they are coming to America for legitimate jobs. Boys from broken homes who do not understand what they are being recruited into. His empire is built on exploitation and suffering. "But you still operate outside the law." "Yes." He met my eyes directly. "I do not pretend to be innocent, Miss Monroe. I have done things I am not proud of, and I will do more before this is over. But there is a difference between a wolf and a monster. Wolves hunt because it is their nature. Monsters hunt because they enjoy the suffering." I did not agree with him. Not entirely, but I understood him, and understanding felt like its own kind of danger. Because Seo-jin was not what I had expected. Not at all. He was brilliant, first of all. The kind of brilliant that saw patterns where others saw chaos, that could predict his enemies' moves 3 steps ahead. He spoke 5 languages fluently and read philosophy in his spare time. His library was full of books on ethics and justice, which seemed ironic for a crime boss until I realized he was not trying to justify his choices. He was trying to understand them. He was also kind. Not soft, not sentimental, but genuinely kind in ways that caught me off guard. He remembered details about his people, their families, their concerns. He paid for college tuition for his crew's children. He maintained a foundation in Hannah's name that supported victims of trafficking, all completely anonymous. And he was lonely. That was the part that got to me. Underneath the controlled exterior and the empty eyes, Seo-jin was profoundly, desperately lonely. The weight of his responsibilities, the isolation of his position, the grief of losing his sister, it had carved him out until there was nothing left but duty and vengeance. I recognized that emptiness. I had felt it myself in the dark years after our mother died, and I became the only thing standing between Marcus and destruction. "You should eat something," I told him one night. It was after midnight, and he was still at his desk, poring over intelligence reports. "When was the last time you had an actual meal?" He looked up, surprised. "I had coffee this morning." Coffee is not a meal. Coffee is a legal stimulant that you're using to abuse your own body. I set a plate of fried rice on his desk. It was simple, the kind of thing I had learned to make stretching limited ingredients during lean times. "Eat." "Miss Monroe." "Deja. My name is Deja. You have been calling me Miss Monroe for 2 months, and it is making me feel like your elementary school teacher." His lips twitched. "Deja, then. You do not have to take care of me." "I know I do not have to. I want to." I sat in the chair across from his desk, watching as he took a hesitant bite of the rice. "You are no good to me, exhausted and malnourished." "How practical of you." "I am a practical person." He ate in silence for a few minutes, and I found myself studying his face the way I had started doing more and more often. The sharp lines of his cheekbones, the way his jaw moved when he chewed, the small scar above his left eyebrow that he had never explained. He was beautiful. I had known that from the first moment I saw him, but I had not let myself think about it. Thinking about it was dangerous. Thinking about it was how people in my situation got hurt. But late at night, alone in my room with nothing but my thoughts for company, I thought about it anyway. "Tell me about your family," Seo-jin said suddenly, pushing aside the empty plate. "Not Marcus. Your parents. Where you come from." "Why do you want to know?" "Because you know almost everything about me, and I know almost nothing about you. It seems unbalanced." "Fair enough. My mother raised us alone," I said. "Our father left when I was 7. She worked 3 jobs to keep us fed and housed, and she still managed to make us feel loved every single day. She died when I was 18. "What happened?" "Heart attack. She was 42 years old and she had never been to a doctor because she could not afford it." I kept my voice flat, the way I had learned to do when talking about things that hurt too much to feel. Marcus was 14. I became his legal guardian and gave up my scholarship to stay home and raise him. "What scholarship?" "Columbia. Full ride. I was going to study pre-law." Seo-jin was quiet for a long moment. "You sacrificed your future for your brother." "I did what I had to do. That is not sacrifice, that is just life. You do what you have to do for the people you love." "Is that why you agreed to help me?" "For Marcus." I considered the question carefully. It was more complicated than a simple yes or no. Partly, I admitted, his surgery is the most important thing. But also, I trailed off, unsure how to explain. Also, Petrov took something from me too. Not a person, but a possibility. My brother was almost one of his victims. If I had not gotten to him in time, Marcus would be dead or in prison or working for a monster. And there are other boys out there, other families who are not as lucky as we were. You want justice. I want to stop him from hurting anyone else. Is that justice? I do not know, but it is something. Seo-jin stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkened street below. "Hannah would have liked you," he said quietly. "She collected strays, people who were damaged or lost or struggling. She had a gift for seeing the good in broken things." "Is that what I am? A stray?" He turned to look at me, and for a moment his mask slipped. I saw the grief again, raw and devastating. But I saw something else too, something that looked almost like hope. "No," he said. "You are something else entirely." The silence of my captivity was broken on the 12th day by something unexpected. Music. It was faint at first, drifting up through the floorboards from somewhere below. Piano. Something classical that I did not recognize, but played with such raw emotion that I found myself pressing my ear to the floor to hear it better. The piece went on for nearly an hour, sometimes soft and melancholic, sometimes crashing with barely contained fury. Whoever was playing was not just performing, they were bleeding. When it stopped, the silence felt heavier than before. The next day, I asked one of the silent women who brought my meals about it. "Who was playing the piano yesterday?" She did not answer, but something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or concern. That night, the music started again. This time I sat by the door, listening, trying to understand what the melody was saying. It felt like a conversation I was only hearing half of, a story being told in a language I almost understood. On the 15th day, I found a note slipped under my door. "You can come down to listen if you would like. Third door on the left." I recognized the handwriting from documents I had seen during my intake. Seo-jin. Part of me wanted to refuse, to maintain whatever distance I could in this impossible situation. But the music had gotten under my skin, and curiosity had always been my weakness. The room on the second floor was smaller than I expected, intimate. A grand piano dominated the space, surrounded by bookshelves and soft lighting. Seo-jin was already seated at the keys when I entered, his back to the door. "Sit anywhere," he said without turning around. "I find it helps me think." "What are you thinking about?" Petrov, Tommy Huang, the 100 different ways this operation could fail. His fingers found the keys, beginning a piece I almost recognized. When I was young, my mother insisted I learn piano. She thought it would make me cultured, sophisticated. What it actually did was give me a way to process things I could not put into words. I sat in an armchair near the window, watching his hands move across the keys. There was a precision to his playing that matched everything else about him. Controlled, deliberate, but underneath, something wild. "You are good," I said. "I have had a lot of time to practice." "That is not what I meant." I pulled my knees up to my chest, getting comfortable. "You play like someone who actually feels the music, not just someone who learned the right notes." He paused, looking at me over his shoulder. "You know music?" My mother loved jazz, used to play records while she cooked. She always said you could tell the difference between musicians who are performing and musicians who are communicating. And which am I? Communicating. Definitely. He was quiet for a moment. Then he turned back to the piano and started playing something different. Slower. More intimate. "This was Hannah's favorite," he said quietly. "She used to ask me to play it whenever she was sad or stressed. Said it made her feel like everything would be okay." I listened, letting the melody wash over me. It was beautiful, haunting, and somehow impossibly sad. "What was she like?" I asked when the piece ended. "Before Petrov, who was she?" Seo-jin's hands rested on the keys, not playing. "She was everything good about our family, the only one of us who managed to escape the weight of who we were." He turned on the bench to face me fully. "Our father was a hard man, cold. He raised me to take over the organization, which meant teaching me to value strategy over sentiment. But Hannah, she refused to let him mold her." "How did she resist?" "By being impossible to corrupt. She had this light in her, this unshakable belief that people were fundamentally good. Even when she saw evidence to the contrary, she chose to believe in redemption." "That sounds exhausting." He laughed, surprised. It was. For those of us who had to watch her extend grace to people who did not deserve it. But it was also. He trailed off, searching for the right word. Inspiring. She made you want to be the person she believed you were. Is that why you are doing all this? The Petrov operation, the legitimate path, all of it? Partly, but also because I finally understand something she tried to tell me for years. He met my eyes. She used to say that the world we grew up in was not the only world that existed, that we always had a choice, even when it did not feel like it. Do you believe that? I am starting to. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sound the distant traffic outside. Then Seo-jin turned back to the piano. Any requests? Something hopeful, I said. I could use some hope right now. He considered this, then began to play. The melody was unfamiliar, but it built slowly, gathering strength and warmth as it went. By the end, I was smiling without realizing it. That was beautiful. What is it called? I do not know. I just made it up. I stared at him. You improvised that entire piece. Sometimes the best music is the kind you do not plan. He stood up from the bench, stretching. Same time tomorrow. It became our ritual. Every evening, I would come down to the music room, and Seo-jin would play. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we sat in silence. But slowly, without either of us intending it, those hours became the foundation of something neither of us expected. Trust. The problem with spending every day with someone is that you start to know them. Really know them in all the small ways that add up to something bigger than attraction or convenience. I learned that Seo-jin took his coffee black, but secretly preferred green tea. That he could not sleep without reading for at least an hour, usually poetry or philosophy. That he had a dry, understated sense of humor that emerged only when he was tired or caught off guard. That he missed his sister with an ache so profound it colored everything he did. And he learned me, the way I paced when I was thinking, my habit of talking to myself when working through problems, the nightmares that sometimes woke me screaming, memories of all the hardship I had witnessed growing up in Bed-Stuy. We became partners, colleagues, and then, without either of us intending it, we became something dangerously close to friends. This is a problem, I told myself one night, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling. This is a huge problem. Because Lee Seo-jin was a criminal, a mob boss, a man who lived outside the law and made his living through intimidation and control. It did not matter that he had rules or codes or justifications. It did not matter that he was trying to take down someone worse. He was still dangerous, just dangerous with better PR. And I was falling for him anyway. The realization hit me like a punch to the chest. I was not just attracted to Seo-jin, not just intrigued by him. I cared about him. I worried about him when he worked too late or forgot to eat. I felt something clench in my chest whenever he smiled that rare, barely there smile. This was bad. This was very, very bad. I tried to create distance. Started taking my meals alone, finding excuses to avoid the late-night strategy sessions that had become our routine. I threw myself into the work, gathering intelligence on Petrov's operation with single-minded focus. Seo-jin noticed, of course. He noticed everything. Have I done something to offend you? He asked one afternoon. We were in his study, reviewing surveillance footage, and I had been deliberately sitting as far from him as possible. No. Then why have you been avoiding me? I have not been avoiding you. We are literally in the same room right now. You know what I mean, Deja. I did know, and I had no idea how to explain it without revealing feelings that would complicate everything. I just need some space, I said finally. This situation is a lot. I need to process. He studied me for a long moment with those dark, perceptive eyes. Then he nodded slowly. Of course. Take whatever time you need. He did not push, did not demand explanations or make assumptions. He simply respected my boundaries and gave me room to breathe, which, frustratingly, only made me like him more. The universe has a sick sense of humor. 3 days later, everything changed. I was alone in my room when I heard the commotion downstairs. Shouting, the sound of furniture breaking, and then a crash that made my blood run cold. I crept down the hallway toward the staircase, my heart pounding. The scene below made my heart stop. Seo-jin was on his knees in the foyer, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. 3 men I did not recognize stood around him, and behind them, smiling that cold, terrible smile, was Victor Petrov. Lee Seo-jin, Petrov said in heavily accented English, the famous Korean prince. Your sister screamed before she died, did you know that? Begged for mercy. Seo-jin's face was a mask of controlled rage. You should not have come here, Petrov. And you should not have been building a case against me. Did you think I would not notice? Did you think my friends in the FBI would not warn me? So that was it. Someone in the federal investigation was working for Petrov. Tommy Huang's testimony was compromised, maybe destroyed entirely. Take care of him, Petrov said to his men. Make it slow. I did not think. I just acted. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from the hallway and swung it at the nearest man, catching him in the back of the head. He went down hard. Who is that? Petrov snarled. Get her. Seo-jin moved in the confusion, using the distraction to break free from his captors. Within seconds, it was chaos, furniture overturning, men shouting, the sounds of struggle filling the brownstone. When it was over, Petrov's men were subdued, and Petrov himself was pinned to the floor, Seo-jin's knee on his back. You should have stayed away, Seo-jin said quietly. Now the FBI will have even more evidence. You think this is over? Petrov spat. I have connections everywhere. I will be out before morning. Perhaps, but the evidence we have been gathering is already in federal hands. Your connections cannot erase what is already documented. Petrov laughed, a cold, ugly sound. You think you have one? I took your sister. I can take everything else too. Seo-jin's expression did not change, but I saw his hands tremble with barely contained rage. Seo-jin, I said quietly, stepping closer. Do not let him pull you down to his level. He looked at me, and I saw the war in his eyes. The desire for vengeance battling with something else. Something Hannah had tried to teach him. He deserves worse than prison, Seo-jin said. Yes, but you deserve to be free of him. Truly free. And that only happens if you let the system handle this. For a long moment, I thought he would not listen, that the grief and rage would win. Then he stood up, stepping away from Petrov. Call Detective Reyes, he said to one of his men. Tell her we have a gift for the FBI. The aftermath took 3 more months to fully resolve. With Petrov's corrupt FBI contact exposed, the federal case was rebuilt from scratch. New prosecutors, new agents, new safeguards against corruption. Tommy Huang testified after all, providing details that brought down not just Petrov, but his entire network. 37 arrests across 6 states. Dozens of trafficking victims rescued and connected with resources for rebuilding their lives. And Petrov himself? Life sentence, no parole. He would spend the rest of his days in a federal prison, alone and forgotten. It is not as satisfying as I imagined it would be, Seo-jin admitted the night of the verdict. We were on the roof of the brownstone, sharing a bottle of expensive whiskey and watching the city lights sparkle below us. No, I agreed, but it is better. This way, he faces real consequences, real accountability. You sound like Hannah. Maybe that is not a bad thing. He turned to look at me, and there was something different in his expression, something open and vulnerable that I had never seen before. Deja, I need to tell you something. Okay, the FBI is not done. They have been building a case against my organization as well. In exchange for my testimony against Petrov, I negotiated immunity for most of my people. But He paused, took a deep breath. I will be facing charges, reduced because of my cooperation, but real. The words hit me like a physical blow. What kind of charges? Racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy. He looked out at the city, his profile sharp against the night sky. I could be looking at 5 to 7 years, maybe less with good behavior. 5 to 7 years. The number echoed in my head, impossible to process. You knew this was coming, I realized. From the beginning. You knew that taking down Petrov meant exposing yourself. Yes. And you did it anyway. For Hannah. He finally turned to face me, and I saw the weight of everything he carried in his eyes. And for myself, I have been running from my own choices for years, Deja, hiding behind codes and rules and justifications. But at the end of the day, I am still a criminal. I have still hurt people. And maybe, he laughed bitterly, maybe paying for that is the only way I can become something else. I should have been angry. I should have felt betrayed that he had kept this from me, used me as part of a plan that was always going to end with him behind bars. Instead, I felt something crack open in my chest. Something that had been locked away for so long I had forgotten it existed. Seo-jin. You do not have to say anything, Deja. I know this changes things. I know we can never. I kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss, not tentative or questioning. I kissed him like I was drowning and he was air, like I had been waiting my entire life for exactly this moment without knowing it. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathing hard, he stared at me with something like wonder. Why? He whispered. Because you are the most frustrating, complicated, infuriating man I have ever met. Because you drove me crazy from the moment you grabbed my wrist in that warehouse. Because you showed me that people can be broken and still choose to be good. I touched his face, tracing the scar above his eyebrow. And because I am in love with you, you idiot. I have been in love with you for months. Deja. His voice was rough with emotion. I cannot ask you to wait for me. 5 years is a long time. You have your own life to build, your own future to create. I will not let you put that on hold for a man who is going to prison. You are not asking me anything. I am telling you. I met his eyes steadily. When you get out, I will be here. Not because I owe you anything. Not because I am obligated. Because I choose to be. Because this. I gestured between us. Whatever this is, it is worth waiting for. He kissed me again, softer this time. Tender. Like I was something precious he was afraid of breaking. I love you, he said against my lips. The first time he had ever said the words. I think I loved you from the moment you laughed when you should have been terrified. I am a very lovable person. He actually laughed at that, a real laugh, full and warm. Yes, you are. We stayed on that roof until dawn, talking about everything and nothing, making plans and promises that might be impossible to keep, learning each other in ways we had been too afraid to before. It was the happiest night of my life, and also in its own way the saddest. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I was there every day, sitting in the gallery and watching as Seo-jin laid out the evidence against Petrov's organization. He was calm, precise, devastating. Every question the defense attorneys threw at him, he deflected with the same controlled intelligence that had drawn me to him in the first place. He did not look at me. We had agreed on that. No visible connection. Nothing that could be used to undermine his testimony or create problems for me later. But I knew he knew I was there. Every day, every hour, bearing witness to the destruction of everything he had built. Marcus came with me for the closing arguments. His surgery had been 3 months ago, funded by an anonymous donor who I absolutely knew was Seo-jin. And for the first time in years, my brother could walk without pain. So, Marcus said, as we watched the jury file out to deliberate, this is the guy. The security job guy. Yes, the guy you are in love with. I had told Marcus everything. Not because I had to, but because he deserved to know. He was my brother, my family, the person I had sacrificed everything to protect. If I was going to build a future with Seo-jin, Marcus needed to understand what that future looked like. Yes, I said again. He is a criminal. He is turning state's evidence and serving time for his crimes. And when he gets out, he wants to go legitimate, use his resources and connections to build something legal. Something Hannah would have been proud of. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he put his arm around my shoulders, the way he used to when we were kids, and I was the one who needed comfort. You know what Mama would say, right? What? She would say that everyone deserves a second chance, that people are not their worst choices. He squeezed my shoulder, and she would probably also say that you are crazy, but in a good way. I laughed even as tears pricked at my eyes. Yeah, she would. The verdict came back guilty on all counts for Petrov. Life without parole. 2 weeks later, Seo-jin stood before a different judge for his own sentencing. I was in the gallery again, this time alone. Marcus had offered to come, but this felt like something I needed to do by myself. Seo-jin looked different in his prison uniform, smaller somehow, more human. He had refused to use his wealth or connections to get better treatment, insisting on being processed like any other defendant. Mr. Lee, the judge said, your cooperation with federal authorities was instrumental in dismantling one of the largest human trafficking networks in the northeastern United States. Your testimony saved lives. However, you have also admitted to serious crimes over a period of many years. Crimes that cannot be dismissed simply because you ultimately chose to do the right thing. She paused, looking at him over her glasses. After careful consideration, I am sentencing you to 4 years in federal prison, with eligibility for parole after 2 years based on good behavior. Additionally, you will complete 500 hours of community service upon release, specifically related to anti-trafficking initiatives. For years, maybe 2 with parole. It was better than I had hoped, better than anyone had expected. Seo-jin's eyes found mine in the gallery, just for a moment, just long enough to communicate everything we could not say out loud. I will wait, I told him silently, however long it takes. And in his eyes, I saw the same promise reflected back. The first year was the hardest. I threw myself into building a new life, partly to distract myself from Seo-jin's absence, and partly because I had finally realized what I wanted to do with my future. Private investigation. It sounds strange, I know. A woman with my background, my history with organized crime, becoming someone who operates on the right side of the law. But everything I had learned during those months with Seo-jin, all the skills I had developed tracking Petrov's organization, they could be used to help people instead of exploiting them. Monroe Investigations, that was what I called it. A one-woman operation at first, working out of a cramped office in Queens that I could barely afford. I specialized in finding missing persons, investigating fraud, and helping trafficking victims track down family members who might be looking for them. The irony was not lost on me. I was essentially doing the kind of work Hannah had died for, using the tools I had learned from her brother. She would like this, Seo-jin said during one of our weekly phone calls. Prison regulations limited contact, but he had managed to get permission for regular calls that we both treasured. You are honoring her memory better than I ever did. I am trying. It is harder than I expected. Tell me. So I did. I told him about the frustrations of building a business from scratch, about the clients who could not pay and the cases that went nowhere, about the nightmares that still sometimes woke me, memories of hardship that refused to fade. And he listened, every time, without judgment or advice unless I asked for it, just present, even through the static of a prison phone line. I miss you, I said at the end of one call, the words slipping out before I could stop them. I miss you too. His voice was soft. Every day. How are you? Really? A long pause. Getting better. The therapy is helping. And there is a program here, helping inmates get their GEDs and explore educational opportunities. I have been volunteering as a tutor. Look at you. becoming a productive member of society. He laughed, and the sound made my heart ache with wanting. Trying to anyway. Marcus helped me move into a bigger office space 6 months after I launched the business. My brother had recovered completely from his surgery and was finally pursuing the education he had always deserved. Full scholarship to NYU, studying computer science. Our mother would be so proud of you, I told him as we painted the walls of my new office. Both of us, actually. She would be confused about your love life, Marcus said with a grin. But proud, yeah. My love life is not that confusing. Deja, you are waiting for a former mob boss who you met when he kidnapped you. That is objectively confusing. I threw a paint-soaked rag at his head. He dodged, laughing. But he was not wrong. On paper, my relationship with Seo-jin made no sense. A black woman from Bed-Stuy and a Korean crime boss with a prison sentence. Different worlds, different experiences, different everything. And yet, every time I thought about walking away, about finding someone easier and more conventional, I remembered the way Seo-jin looked at me, the way he challenged me and supported me and saw me for exactly who I was, the way he had chosen to dismantle his entire life rather than let Petrov's crimes go unpunished. There was no one else like him. There never would be. So I waited. The first time I visited Seo-jin in prison was 8 months into his sentence. I had put it off as long as I could, partly because the visitation process was complicated and partly because I was terrified of what I would find. What if prison had changed him? What if the connection between us had faded without regular contact? What if he had decided that I was not worth waiting for? The visitation room was exactly what I had expected from movies and television. Plastic chairs, fluorescent lighting, guards watching everything with bored expressions. It felt wrong, seeing Seo-jin in this context. He walked in wearing the standard prison uniform, and for a moment I could not breathe. He had lost weight. There were dark circles under his eyes. But when he saw me, his face transformed. That smile, that rare, barely there smile that I had come to treasure more than almost anything else in the world. "Hi," I said as we sat across from each other. "Hi." We stared at each other for a long moment, drinking in details we had been starving for. The shape of his face, the way his hands moved, the sound of his voice without static interference. "You look good," he said finally. "Successful." "You look terrible." He laughed, and some of the tension between us dissolved. "Prison will do that. Are you okay? Really okay?" He considered the question seriously, the way he always did. Better than I expected. The structure helps, actually. And the therapy. He trailed off, looking at his hands. "I am finally dealing with things I have been running from my whole life. My father's legacy. My choices. Hannah. That is good. That is really good. How is Marcus?" "Thriving. He is going to graduate with honors if he keeps this up. And the business? Growing. I hired my first employee last month, a woman named Detective Reyes, former FBI, who helped with the Petrov case. She retired early and wanted something meaningful to do." "Detective Reyes." Seo-jin nodded, recognition in his eyes. "She was good. Fair. She says the same thing about you. She told me once that you were the most honorable criminal she ever met. Damning with faint praise. Or praising with faint damnation." We smiled at each other, and for a moment it was like no time had passed at all. Like we were back on that roof, sharing whiskey and watching the city lights. "I have news," Seo-jin said. "My parole hearing is in 3 months. My lawyer thinks there is a good chance I will be released early." My heart stuttered. "How early?" "Maybe 6 months from now, if everything goes well." 6 months, after more than a year of waiting. 6 months felt like nothing, like a blink. "I have been thinking," Seo-jin continued, his expression growing serious, "about what I want to do when I get out. The legitimate path we talked about." "Tell me." "A foundation. like the one in Hannah's name, but bigger, more comprehensive, not just supporting trafficking victims, but actively working to prevent trafficking in the first place. Education, advocacy, community outreach. He looked at me with those dark eyes. I want to spend the rest of my life undoing the harm I caused. And I was hoping you might want to be part of it. What do you mean? Partner with me. Bring your investigative skills, your connections, your expertise. We could build something real, Deja. Something that matters. I should have said yes immediately. It was everything I had been working toward, everything I believed in. A chance to do meaningful work alongside the man I loved. But nothing about our relationship had ever been simple, and I had learned the hard way that jumping without looking was a good way to get hurt. I need to think about it, I said honestly. Not because I do not want this, but because I need to make sure I am choosing it for the right reasons. Of course. His expression did not change, but I could see the flicker of disappointment he was trying to hide. Take whatever time you need. Seo-jin. I reached across the table to touch his hand, ignoring the guard's warning look. I love you. That has not changed, but I have spent my whole life taking care of other people, sacrificing my own dreams for their needs. If I do this, I need to do it because it is what I want, not because it is what you want for me. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through mine. That is exactly why I love you, Deja. You never let me get away with anything. Someone has to keep you honest. Indeed. He squeezed my hand gently. Take your time. I will be here, waiting. I spent the next 3 months doing something I had never really done before. Thinking about what I actually wanted. Not what was practical. Not what was necessary for survival. Not what would help the people I loved. Just, what did Deja Monroe want for her own life? It was a harder question than it should have been. I talked to Marcus about it. My brother had always been wiser than his years, and his perspective helped me see things I had been blind to. The thing is, he said one evening over dinner at his tiny NYU apartment, you have been in survival mode your whole life. Since Mama died, probably before that. You never got to just want things for yourself. I wanted things. I wanted you to be safe and healthy. That is wanting things for other people. What about you? I thought about it. Really thought about it. I want to matter, I said finally. I want to do work that makes a difference. Not just getting by, not just surviving. Actually changing things. And you think you could do that with Seo-jin? Maybe. Or maybe I could do it on my own. Build my own thing without being attached to someone else's vision. Those are not mutually exclusive, you know. I looked at him, surprised. What do you mean? You could partner with Seo-jin on the foundation stuff while still running your own investigation business. You do not have to choose one or the other. You do not have to give yourself up to be with someone. It was such a simple insight, and yet it felt revolutionary. I had spent my whole life thinking in binary terms. Sacrifice or selfishness, independence or partnership, this or that. But life was not actually like that. Life was messy and complicated and full of possibilities I had never even considered. When did you get so smart? I asked my brother. I have always been smart. You were just too busy saving my life to notice. I threw a napkin at him. He laughed. 2 weeks before Seo-jin's parole hearing, I got an unexpected visitor at my office. Mrs. Lee. Seo-jin's mother was exactly what I had imagined. Elegant, severe, and radiating disapproval from every pore. She was dressed in expensive black, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a perfect bun, and she looked at my cramped queen's office like it was a crime scene. "Miss Monroe," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "We need to talk. Please sit down." I gestured to the client chair across from my desk, trying to project more confidence than I felt. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Lee?" She sat with the grace of someone who had spent decades learning to control every movement. "I want to know your intentions toward my son." I love him. I am planning to be with him when he gets out. That is not what I asked. Her dark eyes, so similar to Seo-jin's, fixed on me with unsettling intensity. I asked about your intentions. What do you want from this relationship? I do not want anything from it. I want it. There is a difference. Is there? She leaned forward, slightly. My son has resources, connections, power. Even after prison, he will still be wealthy. He will still open doors for you. How do I know you are not simply positioning yourself for advantage? I understood, suddenly, where this was coming from. Mrs. Lee had spent years watching people try to manipulate her family, try to extract value from the Lee name. She was doing what any protective mother would do. I also understood that I needed to be absolutely honest with her. Mrs. Lee, I said carefully, your son did not offer me money or connections when we met. He held me captive because I stumbled into his operation. By the time he started trusting me, I had seen him at his worst, grieving for his sister, plotting revenge, making decisions that would destroy his own life. There was nothing romantic or strategic about how we came together. It was messy and complicated and probably ill-advised. And yet you stayed. I stayed because your son is the most genuine person I have ever met. He does not pretend to be anything he is not. He takes responsibility for his choices, even when those choices cost him everything. And he loved his sister with his whole heart. I met her eyes directly. Hannah sounds like she was an extraordinary person. Seo-jin wants to honor her memory by becoming someone she would have been proud of. I want to help him do that. Mrs. Lee was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, her expression softened. You remind me of her, she said quietly. Hannah, the same fire, the same stubbornness. I will take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. She stood up, smoothing her expensive skirt. My son has made many mistakes in his life, but choosing you, that may have been the smartest thing he has ever done. Does that mean you approve? It means I am willing to give you a chance. She moved toward the door, then paused. Miss Monroe, Deja, take care of him. He has lost so much. He deserves to be happy. I know. I am going to do everything I can to make sure he is. After she left, I sat in my office for a long time, staring at nothing. Mrs. Lee's visit had crystallized something I had been struggling to articulate. This was not just about me and Seo-jin. It was about family, about legacy, about choosing to become part of something bigger than yourself. Was I ready for that? I thought about my mother, about the sacrifices she had made, about how she had built a life for her children out of nothing but determination and love. And I knew my answer. The day Seo-jin was released from prison, I was waiting outside the gates. It was raining because of course it was. The universe could not resist the dramatic symbolism. I stood under an umbrella, watching the entrance, counting the seconds until the door would open. And then there he was. 2 years had changed him. He was leaner, harder, with new lines around his eyes and gray, threaded through his black hair. But when he saw me, his face transformed into that smile. That rare, precious smile that I had been waiting to see in person for what felt like forever. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, taking in all the ways we had changed and all the ways we had stayed the same. Hi, said. Hi. You ready to get out of here? He laughed, a real laugh, and stepped forward to pull me into his arms. The umbrella fell, forgotten, as the rain soaked both of us, and neither of us cared. I have been ready for 2 years, he said against my hair. I have been ready my entire life. Building a life together after everything we had been through was harder than I expected, not because we did not love each other, not because we had doubts about our choices, but because real life is messy and complicated in ways that dramatic confrontations and prison sentences do not prepare you for. We had to learn how to be together when there was no crisis to focus on, how to argue about whose turn it was to do the dishes, how to navigate the thousand small compromises that make up a shared existence. It was not always pretty. "You are being unreasonable," Seo-jin said one evening, 3 months after his release. We were in the middle of our first real fight, an argument about whether to expand my investigation business or focus entirely on the foundation. "I am being practical. The foundation is your dream, Seo-jin. Mine is right here in this office doing work that I built myself. I thought we were building something together. Together does not mean giving up who I am." The words hung in the air between us. I could see the hurt in his eyes, and I knew I had gone too far. "I never asked you to give up who you are," he said quietly. "I only asked you to let me be part of it." I took a deep breath, forced myself to calm down. "I know. I am sorry. This is just hard for me. I spent so long being alone, being the only one I could depend on, learning to share, to compromise, to let someone else into my decisions. It is not natural." He moved closer, taking my hands in his. "Deja, I do not want you to be less than you are. I want to grow with you, not instead of you. Can we try to figure this out together instead of fighting about it?" And that was how we learned to be a couple, not through grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through small moments of vulnerability, through choosing connection over conflict, even when it was hard. We did end up partnering on the foundation, but we also kept my investigation business separate, a space that was entirely mine. Seo-jin supported it without trying to control it, and I learned to accept his help without feeling like I was giving up my independence. It was not perfect. We still argued. We still frustrated each other. But we also laughed together, dreamed together, built something meaningful together. And every night, falling asleep beside him, I felt like I was finally home. 3 years after Seo-jin's release, we stood on the stage of a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, surrounded by hundreds of people who had gathered to celebrate the opening of the Hannah Lee Center for Trafficking Prevention. It was the culmination of everything we had been working toward. A comprehensive facility that combined shelter services for victims with educational programs, legal assistance, and community outreach. The kind of place Hannah would have dreamed of creating. Seo-jin squeezed my hand as we looked out at the crowd. His mother was there, her expression proudly approving. Marcus was there, now working as a tech consultant for major nonprofits. Detective Reyes was there, running the investigative arm of our organization. And in the front row, a portrait of Hannah smiled at us. Forever young, forever missed, but finally maybe at peace. "You ready for this?" Seo-jin asked, "As ready as I will ever be." He stepped up to the microphone, and I watched the crowd fall silent. They were here because they believed in what we were building, because they had seen two people from completely different worlds choose to create something meaningful instead of something destructive. "Thank you all for being here," Seo-jin began. "This center is named for my sister, Hannah. She believed that every person deserves to be seen, to be valued, to be protected. She gave her life trying to help others, and this is our way of continuing her work." He paused, looking at me. I would not be standing here without the woman beside me. Deja Monroe found me when I was lost in grief and vengeance. She challenged me to be better than my circumstances. She showed me that it is never too late to choose a different path. I stepped up beside him, taking the microphone. 3 years ago, I said, I walked into a warehouse in Brooklyn looking to collect a debt. What I found instead was a reason to believe in second chances, in redemption, in the possibility that people can change, grow, become something more than their worst choices. I looked at Seo-jin, then back at the crowd. This center is proof of that possibility. It exists because two imperfect people decided to try anyway, to build something good out of pain and loss and all the mistakes we had made along the way. If we can do it, Seo-jin added, anyone can. After the speeches, after the ribbon cutting and the champagne toasts and the endless congratulations, we slipped away to the roof of the building. Our old habit, finding quiet places to be alone together amidst the chaos. The city spread out below us, millions of lights against the darkness. Somewhere out there, lives were being saved because we had chosen to fight for something better. "Tell me something," Seo-jin said, pulling me close. "What?" "If you could go back to that night in the warehouse, knowing everything that would happen, would you still let me take you?" I thought about it, about the fear and the uncertainty, the danger and the heartbreak, the long wait and the hard work and all the ways we had been tested. "Yes," I said finally, without hesitation, even though I was terrible. "You were not terrible. You were wounded. There is a difference." He turned to face me, his expression soft and wondering. How did I get so lucky? Luck had nothing to do with it. We chose each other. Every day, through everything, we kept choosing each other. He kissed me, gentle and sure, and I felt the same thing I had felt that first night on his brownstone roof. The sense that I was exactly where I belonged, with exactly the person I was meant to find. "I love you, Deja Monroe," he said against my lips. "Deja Lee," I corrected. His eyes widened. "What?" I pulled back, laughing at his expression. "What? You think I did not notice the ring box hidden in your sock drawer? You are not as subtle as you think. I was going to propose tonight. I had a whole speech planned. So propose." He stared at me for a moment, then laughed. "You are the most impossible woman I have ever met. And you love me anyway." "Yes." He pulled the ring from his pocket, the one he had clearly been planning to surprise me with. "Yes, I do." The house we built together sat on a quiet street in Park Slope, close enough to the brownstone where everything started that I could walk there when I needed to remember. It was Sunday morning, and sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as I made breakfast. In the living room, I could hear Seo-jin reading to our daughter, 3 years old and already showing signs of her father's stubborn determination. "Mama," she called out, "Daddy says I cannot have cookies for breakfast." "Daddy is correct," I called back. "Pancakes first, then maybe cookies." I heard her theatrical sigh, followed by Seo-jin's quiet laugh. The sound still made my heart stutter, even after all this time. Marcus appeared the back door, letting himself in with his key. "Morning, sis. Brought pastries. You are a lifesaver." "I know." He set the box on the counter and leaned against the refrigerator. "So, ready for the board meeting tomorrow?" The foundation had grown beyond anything we had imagined. 3 centers now with plans for more, a staff of over 50 people, partnerships with law enforcement agencies across the country, and Marcus, my brilliant brother, running the technology division that tracked trafficking patterns and helped victims reconnect with their families. Ready as I will ever be. You. Always. He looked toward the living room, where Seo-jin was now giving our daughter a piggyback ride around the furniture. "You know, I never told you this, but when you first told me about him, I thought you had lost your mind." I probably had. But watching you two together, watching what you built, I get it now. Some things are worth the risk. Some people, I corrected. Some people are worth the risk. Seo-jin appeared in the doorway, our daughter clinging to his back like a tiny koala. His hair was completely gray now, but his smile was still the same. Still rare, still precious, still mine. "The little monster is hungry," he announced, "and she insists that Uncle Marcus promised her ice cream." "I absolutely did not," Marcus protested, even as our daughter gave him puppy eyes that could melt steel. I looked at my family, my husband, who had once held me captive and then spent the rest of his life making sure I never felt unsafe again. My brother, healthy and whole and becoming the man our mother always knew he could be. My daughter, who would grow up knowing that love can be found in the most unexpected places. "All right," I said, picking up my spatula. "Pancakes for everyone. And then maybe if someone eats all her fruit, we can talk about ice cream." "I will eat all the fruit," my daughter promised. "We will see about that." Seo-jin caught my eye across the kitchen, and we shared a look that contained an entire conversation. Gratitude, amazement, the lingering disbelief that this was actually our life. I mouthed the words, "I love you." He mouthed them back, and outside, the city continued its endless chaos, unaware that in this ordinary kitchen, in this ordinary house, a love story that had started with a kidnapping had become something extraordinary, something worth every terrifying moment, something worth every single day of waiting, something worth the risk.